Our central question this week is, what is media? And you'll see from the recommended reading, the three short articles that are in Language and the Media book by Darrington Lambrew, that there are three different suggestions and three different readings about what media is. One from Katie Wales, one from Raymond Williams, and one from Ruth Finnegan. So all of them try to address what media is. And if you also have a look at some of the recommended sort of additional extension readings, there's a very interesting chapter from Tim Markham in Media and Everyday Life that's well worth reading, and is actually quite a simple, straightforward read. And you may find actually reading that first might help you to understand the Finnegan, Williams and Wales pieces. Anyway, so Ruth Finnegan suggests that lots of different things can be media, including things like coins. So, we've got here a picture of a Roman coin that shows Marcus Aurelius on it. And, what does that communicate? How can that be media? So I suppose what we would need to start considering, if we see a coin as being media, as being a medium of communication. So in other words, something that communicates to us from the people that made this coin. There is information being shared there across time. And there are lots and lots of bits of information that we can gain from this coin. We can straight away see that if a society has coins, then it suggests, of course, that they have an economy, a reason for having money. It's not just a society that relies upon barter, but instead it's a society that uses these objects, these tokens, in place of bartering other objects. So instead of swapping with your neighbour when you've got 2 sacks of potatoes, you only need one, and you swap a sack of potatoes for a sack of corn, for example. Instead of doing that, which of course is, what very early societies who just had bartering, and in fact even now some societies still use straightforward bartering and no money. But clearly the Romans had an economy that used these tokens. So we realise then straight away that there was some sort of sophisticated thinking going on behind the setup of this society. We are also aware as well that they could even make these objects, these coins, and it's not hand carved. Coins are pressed and sort of made out of lots and lots of coins are made, and obviously the metal is heated up and then poured into a mold. So we have all of those bits of information being explained straight off just by looking at this object. We know that they had writing, because we can see symbols around the edge that we recognise. We also can start to make suggestions, and we can start to sort of get ideas about how people looked then in this Roman period. We can't necessarily pick out what they wore, because this is only showing this man's head, but we certainly know that it was clearly not uncommon to see somebody in charge wearing this type of headband. And we know that they had beards and short hair. So, again, that tells us something about the fashions of the age and so on. So there are lots and lots of bits of information that we can get out of just looking at a coin. And, you know, it tells us what was important to that society. And clearly this man, Marcus Aurelius, was important. So there is some communication going on there, even if it's not what we might at first think, oh, that's part of the media. We can also look at things like this, maps, and this is part of the world's largest and oldest map, the Urbano Monti map, and you can follow the links there. If you go on to, I will upload all the slides and you can click on there, they're all hyperlinks. So we can see from this map, which doesn't actually, this particular part doesn't show us any landmass, instead it shows us the sea. And this also tells us something about importance and the type of world that this map was created in. So, you know, we can see at the very top that there's a lobster there, or something that looks very like a lobster. But we can also see on the right-hand side, we can see two ships, and they have both sails that are rolled up and they have oars. So we know straight away that this isn't a mechanized time. You know, that instead the ships required a great deal of human power. And we can also tell more about the society by looking at the central image there of what appears to be a king. You know, there's a flag, and instead of him holding an orb, and he's holding a scepter, so that's the sort of the wand stick thing, but the orb is what looks like a globe. And if you look at paintings from the past and sort of even the Queen Elizabeth II's coronation photographs, you'll see that she's holding an orb and a scepter, and you know, these are symbols of rulership of kings and queens. So, you know, there's that going on, and you know, we could really sort of find out an awful lot more about this quite easily by sort of finding out more about the map. But, you know, we can see that this is obviously somebody who is important sitting there in the centre because he's slightly higher up. You know, and the people on the two characters on either side of him are both kneeling. So, you know, we know that that's symbolic, that shows sort of deference and so on. So there are all of these sort of symbols and signs going on that we can understand, and we can begin to work out why this was important, who these people were, and so on. Aside from the fact that at the bottom of the central part where the king is, it says Filippo, re Filippo Max. And then we might think, this must have been perhaps a king called Philip. But we also have, to the right of the three figures, we have a single figure who is rising up out of the sea and looks as though this is half man and half some sort of serpent. So, you know, we can also then start to say, well, you know, the people then must have thought that these types of creatures were real, and that they'd had experience of them. And, you know, we know from ancient sort of myths and legends, and even more recent myths and legends, that this notion of sea creatures and mermaids and mermen are very much part of certainly a Western cultural landscape. So, you know, we can pick out all of these things just from, again, these images. And yes, it has text on there, but, you know, the text is very small, and I think from what I can make out, I think it's possibly in Latin. But, you know, again, we could go and look closely at this, we could study this, and we could find out an awful lot more. Interestingly, there's also the red band that's going around the bottom there has numbers in it, and the map itself also has been divided up into rectangular quadrants. And that tells us something about, again, how the people of the time were able to create this map. And it tells us about the importance of mathematics. So, all of these things are coming into play just by, looking at one portion of a single image. So it's communicating, again, lots and lots of information about this time and about these people. So we can also look at paintings. Like this very famous painting by Holbein called The Ambassadors that you can see at the National Gallery. And, it's probably one of the most famous paintings in Britain. And, if you haven't had the opportunity to ever go and have a look at it, once lockdown and the whole virus thing is over, I do really recommend that you go and have a look at this, because it's a fascinating painting. But, again, we can begin to pick out bits of information from this. We can see that this painting has two men in it, standing next to some sort of raised table or shelves that have got lots of different objects, including a globe and a couple of globes and a musical instrument on there, as well as some books that are open. We can also see that there's a strange sort of distorted skull at the bottom. And if you've seen this painting in real life, but even looking at it on a screen, if you move round to the left-hand side and look at this painting at an angle, the elongated skull comes into focus, and it stands out almost in 3 dimensions. And this is not a 20th century painting. If I move on to the next slide, this is some of the information about it taken from the National Gallery, and we've then got some context for this. But the important thing is that this painting was made in the 16th century, and everything that's in there, every single thing in that painting, has some sort of meaning, even if they are meanings that we commonly, the general public, don't get any longer. The people of the 16th century, and certainly the educated people of the 16th century, would have understood all of the different parts, or most of them. In the same way, when we look at contemporary pieces like this cartoon that came out on Thursday, and what date? Thursday 24th, I think, Thursday 24th of September. So this appeared in The Guardian. Oh yes, it says 24th of September along the bit on the bottom. Again, you can follow that link and you can go and see the comments that have been made about this. But if we were to look at a cartoon from, say, 20 years ago or 30 years ago, we might not get everything. We might not understand all of the references and all of the jokes. And even now, we might look at this cartoon and not get all of the references. If you have been looking at some of the cartoons that have been around, but particularly those from Steve Bell, you'll know that he has repeatedly depicted Boris Johnson, our Prime Minister, as a bottom, as you can see there. So we've got him there and we know that it's Boris Johnson, partly because there is this sort of constant referencing by Steve Bell of him being a bottom, but also the blonde, messy hair that is very much Boris Johnson's trademark. And we have him there dressed in army fatigues, holding a gun, and another figure in the background who is sitting in some sort of hole that's surrounded by sandbags as protection, who's also holding a gun. And if we weren't sure at the beginning who that figure with the sort of quite bulbous head and glasses was, we would know by the text. but you know, it's supposed to be Dominic Cummings, who is Boris Johnson's main advisor. And so we've got the text there, you know, I've been thinking Dom, so there we have the reference. If we weren't sure that it was Dominic Cummings, we would know now. Maybe this piss up is not such a good idea. It'll clash with Theresa May's Festival of Brexit. So this is referencing things that are going on at the moment. And, you know, the whole notion of Brexit, but also what's going on, you know, literally on a day-to-day basis. And then we have the next cell there saying, not to mention happy new lockdown, which of course is what we have just gone into, another lockdown. God, it's lonely at the top. And again, this is something that we have been seeing referenced over the last few days about how miserable Boris Johnson is, and how he's not coping particularly well. Nothing but tough choices. And then the final cell, should it be Mustique or Perugia for my secret holiday? And this is reference to Mustique is the island owned, I think it's owned by Richard Branson, that Boris Johnson has been to repeatedly. And Perugia, of course, Boris Johnson was, according to some media sources, was supposed to have gone there, I think, last weekend secretly. You know, that was sort of, again, across Twitter, not widely reported in the mainstream British press, but reported by the Italian press. So, you know, we know as well that Boris Johnson's father went to Greece earlier in the summer, which was again sort of against the recommendations and rules and regulations for lockdown. And then, of course, we've got Dominic Cummings saying Barnard Castle. And shooting a gun at the same time, because of course, you know, again, we would need to know these references. Barnard Castle was where Dominic Cummings went right at the sort of very beginning of lockdown, because it was apparently his wife's birthday, but you know, he denied it and then said that, you know, he'd gone to check his eyes and so on. All of those sort of stories, which we can easily go and find out more about, but the point being that all of this is communicating more about the current situation and about what life is like in political Britain at the moment. So this has images in it, but it also has text, but it's absolutely reliant upon the context of the time. Okay, so I'm going to take a break there again. So go and have a look online, go and have a look at Twitter, see if you can find out some more about either the ambassadors or Roman coins or ancient maps, or also have a look and see what the current discussions are about Dominic Cummings, Boris Johnson, and, you know, what the shape of things are at the moment, and have a look as well to see what the current cartoon is from Steve Bell. And then we'll come back for the final video, which will, see you in a moment.